All right, y'all, we back with another episode of Define Your Legacy. I'm your host, Theus Elijah McBee. And today's guest, we have Jackie Cummings Koski. How are you doing today? How are you doing?
Hey, Theus, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be talking to you today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on the show. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, well, I'm Jackie Cummings Koski, and I am a Black single mom. Much like your mom, I heard your story and everything. So I'm always team single mom. But I grew up being raised by a single dad with 6 kids. So it was challenging. We grew up in poverty, but I still don't even know how he raised 6 kids. So that was kind of my upbringing. I grew up in the rural South. Money was always short. And I did manage to go to college. That was one of my big, early decisions that I made. But right before I went to college, my dad passed away before I even graduated from high school. So that was a wake up moment because I was pretty much on my own at 18. So I figured the way out of poverty, because that was sort of my big dream when I was younger, right? I just wanted to be out of poverty and not have to struggle so much. So I figured going to school would be a way to do that. And so I was able to, get through school, although, I had to pay my own way through. I worked at least 2 jobs the whole time, 50 plus hours a week, and I was still going to school full time. So got through school, was able to get a pretty decent job. My very first real job out of college was at Walmart headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas. So I headed off to Bentonville, Arkansas at, 22. And so that's where my career kind of started. But once I moved to Arkansas, I ended up getting married. We moved away right after we got married and moved to Ohio. And as soon as I got to Ohio, found out I was pregnant. So I became a mom, and fast forward 10 years, been a mom, wife for 10 years, starting my career. I ended up getting a divorce. So that was the thing that really woke me up as far as my finances. And, during the time that I was getting divorced, one of the craziest things that I still to this day regret, but when we were splitting up the assets, and we didn't have a whole lot at the time, we're like in our early 30s, but splitting the money up, the only thing we had was like our retirement money. The house didn't have much equity. We had payments on the cars. So the only thing was our retirement. And so when I'm looking at my 401k, I had $20,000 in there. And I thought, hey, I was doing pretty good. I'm in my mid 30s, $20,000. But then when I looked at my husband's, he had $120,000. So he had $100,000 more than I did. And I just never wanted to feel that ignorant again. I didn't know. We didn't sit down and talk about these things. I had no idea. I don't think he was trying to hide it or anything. I just didn't realize it was such a big disparity. And, today I kind of figured out some of the differences. Maybe he was saving a little bit more. Our match was about the same, but he had some different investments than I had. Women tend to be a little more conservative. So, that got split up, appropriately during the divorce. But from then on out, that's when I vowed to learn about money, investing, finance. And that set me off on my journey to, financial literacy, financial education, not just for myself, but I wanted to do that for my daughter. And turns out there's a lot of people that don't know about money, just the basics. And so that became sort of my big dream. I wanted to create a financially literate society. And so that's where I am today.
Okay. So I noticed whenever I talk to people about financial literacy, I think most people have a moment where they realize okay, here's where I need to flip the switch. And it sounds right, this was your moment. So what do you feel is the biggest difference between the person you were back then versus the person you are now?
I think the biggest difference is that I'm curious. And when I'm curious, I have, these days with technology, you got the resource to dig and research anything you want to find out about. You can Google exactly what your question is and get the answer. So I guess generationally, when I was in college, the internet, computers and things like that, they existed, but they weren't as widely available like they are today. Especially, I could just Google something on my phone in 2 seconds. So being able to have instant access like that, that has helped me a lot. And I'm just more curious. And I think I used to rely too heavily on what other people would tell me. And that's certainly valuable, consider the source. But now I will do my own research and I will seek out multiple sources or multiple like perspectives and ideas. Like you're kind of, sort of what you're doing with your podcast, you kind of want to hear different perspectives and you just bring it all together. So I think that's the main difference. I trust myself a little bit more to do my own research, to be curious, to ask a lot of questions and to start figuring things out. And that gives me satisfaction. So I guess I didn't have that growing up, and it definitely makes a difference for me.
Yeah. But in that journey towards financial literacy, I always feel that it helps, right, to have some sort of mentor or someone else that is either gone through what you've gone through. So when you were going through those moments, did you have someone that you could reach out to?
When I was younger growing up, I don't know if I really had a money mentor, and I don't know that I was even taught what a mentor was. I wasn't necessarily like an athlete, because in that space that happens a lot. But as I got older and I started moving towards the things I was curious about, there was always a community, a group. And I would say probably as far as financial stuff, I had a group of mentors. So I joined this investment club a few years after I got divorced because I was so interested in the stock market, investments and things like that. So I joined this investment club that was near where I lived, and they were all extremely friendly, extremely smart, and they liked the same things that I did. So there was a few that kind of took me under their wing, and they became my mentor. And it wasn't like a formal mentoring setup necessarily. It just naturally happened. And I think those are the best ones. So I think that's when I discovered how important community was, because you want to be around like-minded people, and just, naturally you're going to have certain ones to navigate with a handout and say, hey, let me help you. And you will start to figure out who is that person that you just connect with. And sometimes it may not even be in person. It might be online, from someone that you met via social media or in a group or something like that.
And you did this by yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I moved away to Ohio. Most of my family is back down south in South Carolina and Georgia. So I really didn't have anybody in my space that knew about investing or the things that I was interested in. Like I had friends and, we would go out socially and have fun and do things, but none of them was really into the personal finance thing and the investing and the money stuff like I was. So that's when I had to seek out other friends. I mean, I still have those friends. They're down for anything, but that was just not the area that they were interested in.
And the reason why I asked that is because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that might be interested in either financial literacy, but either their friends aren't. But you're just a good example of how, you go out and find them, right? You go out and find people that already are. There's billions of people on this world. I guarantee you there's someone else or another group out there that shares a common interest with you, right?
Right. And not only that, but once you learn what you learn, you can bring it back to the group. Like I became that unofficial, oh, you need somebody to look at your 401k. Oh, Jackie will look at it for you. I became that person for my group and my friends. So it worked out pretty good because, the way that I think is as soon as I learn something new, I want to share it with somebody else. Of course, my daughter, my family, my friends, or whatever. So you're right. The people around me weren't interested in the whole money stuff like I was, and that's cool. But that's when I said, okay, let me find a community or group of people, or even an individual that likes this stuff as much as I do. And that will bring us together. And it's kind of interesting because I started to meet so many different people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different experiences than me. And I think it broadened me as a person to be adjacent to people that, kind of had a different experience than I did. So that's the value that I got from seeking out other people.
Yeah. And it's amazing what you can attract when you go out and join different clubs and talk to people like that,
Right.
People, again, that share a common interest.
Right.
But so what does it mean to you, like, to be able to invest now and talk about, 401ks? Do you feel that you wish you would have done it sooner? slash,
Oh,
you know.
yeah. Heck yeah. Everybody that you talk to, even if you talk to a 20-year-old, they probably say, I wish I would have started sooner. 40-year-old, 60-year-old, everybody always says, I wish I would have started sooner. And the reason why is because that power of compound growth, right? It's like the time is more valuable than the money if you start early enough. So, I mean, I'm just happy that I learned it, right? I mean, we can't turn back the hands of time. I look at the things that were beneficial to me that helped me. Like, for instance, even though I grew up poor, my dad, didn't believe in having a lot of debt. So he instilled that in me. So the fact that I didn't, I see all these stories about, I paid off, $40,000 in debt, $100,000 in debt. And that's really great. And I think about, okay, I should feel lucky that I didn't have all that debt to pay off, because that would have slowed me down from saving. So I have to give my dad credit for, just because you're poor, it doesn't mean that you can't have good financial habits or have good lessons. And that was one of the lessons that I realized really helped me out. It just lightened my load. Like, I did have a little bit of student loans. I think the federal government, they keep your student loan information from forever. So from 20 plus years ago, I was able to see what my student loan was. It was only like $6,000. And I only took out a loan in my senior year. So yeah, I mean, I was just being able to learn about investing. Again, I became so curious, and, the world has changed. So back when I was younger, investing was very expensive. Like, you would pay $50 a trade, $50 to buy, $50 to sell. So it didn't make sense for most people unless you're wealthy. It was a wealthy man's game. So now that there's no trading fees, anything you want to learn about investing is online somewhere. You can even go to school for it now if you want to, or take a class or whatever you want to do. So I feel good that I have learned about, investing probably more than anything, that I wasn't afraid of it anymore. Like, I didn't understand the stock market. It confused me, and I was just kind of afraid of it. And one of the things that helped me with the investment club is that I wasn't afraid of investing anymore. And it wasn't just that it helped me in the investing club, but everywhere, when it came to my 401k, my IRA, any account that I invested in, I knew how it worked, and I felt good, and I felt that I knew what I was doing, and I knew how powerful it would be long term just by starting. I didn't have to know everything. So they helped me everywhere, 401k, IRA, my HSA, so things like that. So the investing part is powerful. And obviously the stock market is not the only way, but that's what I like. That's what I was most curious about.
Yeah. And also too, you mentioned the idea of being, I guess, a little bit fearful of the stock market at first, and just getting started. But I always try my best to mention fractional shares too. Like,
right.
Please, y'all, for, just a small example, right? You don't need a bunch of money to get started. You don't, I won't turn this into a fractional shares episode, but please, y'all, do your research.
Yeah, but let me tell you that. Well, let me tell you this. Even though I've been investing for a while, again, still that curious side of me, right? I'm still always curious about things like newer things that encourage people to start investing, even if they don't have that much. Fractional shares is one of them. So I like to open up accounts with the different brokers and see who I believe is the best as far as, is their app easy to use, right? Is their platform easy to use? So with the fractional shares, I know both Schwab and Fidelity does fractional shares.
Yep.
And lately I have tried out Fidelity to see how the fractional share, they made it super easy. Like, you go on and you just click and you could say, do you want to purchase based on the share or based on the amount?
Yeah.
So if you choose the amount and you want Google, you can buy $50 worth of Google. The same thing with Schwab. And my prediction thing is that all these other brokers will follow. Like, why would I guess I want to support the platforms and the companies that are encouraging in a healthy way young people or anyone that doesn't have a lot of money to invest to get them started. And it's not even young people, some people are starting over, or some people were never taught this. So if you are a beginner, to have, some of these bigger companies like Fidelity and, Vanguard and T. Rowe Price, Schwab, you name them, all the big ones, they should be trying to do something to encourage young investors, provide a little education around it. But I'm a big fan of the fractional shares too. And of course, the no fees to trade and the education that most of these platforms have now, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, especially too when you're getting started. I'll get ready to ask you what your first type of investment was, but I think naturally it's more so I think the fear in the beginning more so the actual number, right? Because after a while, you won't start to invest. You'll start to invest more and more. But when you're thinking about if a company, let's say Amazon, and please don't buy this just because I'm talking about it. But if a company is over like $3,000, right, and someone can't afford that, understanding that fractional shares can allow everyone to play the game. So even in going off that, what was your first ever investment in the stock market or just in general?
Yeah, I'll say, and this is probably true for most people, the first time I started investing was through my employer retirement plan, which was a 401k because they match. So for most people, if you ask them if they invest, they might not say that they invest, but they have a 401k. If you have a 401k, you're investing. So that's a good way to start. So if you go look at your statement, you can look and see what you're invested in. And usually it's going to be sort of like an index fund or a mutual fund or something like that, which is simply a basket of stocks. So instead of you buying Google by itself, you buy the basket of stocks. You could have Google, Walmart, McDonald's, Apple, all those in one basket. And that's basically what a mutual fund is. So I started through, you know what? Okay, so I take that back. I just thought about this. So when I was in college and, I was working the 2 jobs and all that, one of those jobs was working at Walmart. I did all kinds of work there, but by the time I left or by the time I graduated, I was doing office work for a couple of years. And they had, so if anyone has this, if you're working for, Walmart, Target, or any big companies, many of them offer what's called an employee stock purchase plan. And Walmart would give you a 15% discount on Walmart stock. So you immediately got a 15% return. Now, it's probably not a good idea to be, have all your money in Walmart stock. That's just too risky. But to be able to get a 15% discount because I was an employee of Walmart, that was the first stock I ever bought and didn't understand the value of it.
Okay. And how long ago was this you're saying?
This, oh God, don't have me look, but this would have been,
it was longer than 5 years ago.
Okay, this would have been around the early 90s.
Okay, and just know where Walmart is now, everyone.
I know. I don't even want to look. I don't want to look. I would hate to look and see because I wish I would have held onto that side. I think now I had other coworkers that were encouraging me to buy Walmart stock. They were like, yeah, it's a really good stock and it splits and all these things. I didn't know what that meant, but they were people that I trusted. So I started having so much taken out of my paycheck, every 2 weeks, going into Walmart stock with a 15% discount. And I think I ended up selling it when, I was married. And I think we used that for a down payment on the house that we got. Okay.
Well, I mean, it was for, a good cause, but I'll say this though, in that example, people the examples of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, the big companies, and you say, well, I wish I never sold this, 10 years ago, whatever. But at the same time, there's companies out there that it's probably a good thing, right? That people sell at a high.
Right. Oh yeah. Let's talk about Enron and Blockbuster, MCI, WorldCom. Yeah. So you never know.
Right. You really never know, I think. But again, to your point too, talking about mutual funds and ETFs, those are to me a little safer. But I just want to acknowledge that because to me, the buy and hold game is very unpredictable. I know everyone likes to use the examples of, like I said, those big companies. But to me, for every Amazon, for every Walmart that's out there, I promise you there's another company that probably did the exact opposite. So was that tough for you? Having to deal with, knowing that Walmart, years later was, where it is now?
No, I don't have too many regrets because I'm investing in the stock market now. And I do have some companies that I've had for over 15 years. Like Apple is one of those companies, again, not endorsing it or anything.
Right.
But when I learned about investing, like you said, it's a buy and hold game. And when I say hold, it doesn't mean hold and do nothing. I still keep an eye on them. I still do my research. I'm kind of a nerd. So the investment company or the investment club that I'm in, still in that club. I started, back in 2008, which turned out to be a really good time. But I like analyzing good companies and good stocks. I have attended shareholders meetings. I have attended quarterly earnings calls. I like to look at, the leadership, the management. I like to look at what were they doing, last year during the George Floyd protests, and was they standing up and saying what they were going to do? If they were saying what they're going to do, then what did you do? So I'm looking at almost every aspect. I don't want to invest in any companies that's investing in private prisons, so I like to look at the whole business and what's going on with the stocks that I own. And that's just a small part of my overall investment pictures. The majority, I would say 80% is still, index funds, but I enjoy analyzing great companies and being an owner.
Okay. And I like that approach too. You mentioned it's not just buy and hold. You're still paying attention. Right. You don't just buy a stock and just say, okay, I'm going to go out with my day. It's still your money. Right at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Still you are.
Yeah, you don't want to not watch your money.
Yeah.
I mean, with real estate, some people consider it passive. It's not really passive because you got to keep an eye on your property. You don't want somebody trashing it. So it's just no matter. So I believe in passive, income, passive investing, and things like that. But nothing's really passive. You still got to keep an eye on it. With index funds, I don't have to keep quite as much of an eye on it because it's spread out among a lot of companies. But with individual companies, you definitely want to keep an eye on it because they can go to nothing in a minute. Yeah.
I know the index funds and ETFs and the basket of stocks, they're not always appealing, or, they aren't your typical, 30% in one day kind of situation.
Right. Exactly. Because not every, and it depends on which index. If you're doing a straight up like an S&P 500, which is the 500 largest companies in the US, if you're doing that, that's spread among all kinds of industries. It's tech heavy, but still, it just spreads out your risk a lot more.
Yeah.
So
right. And you mentioned too, I think going back to Walmart, taking a little bit of your money out of your paycheck towards that. So in terms of taking a little bit of your money from your paycheck, that brings up the discussion that I want to talk about too, was HSA and a health savings account. And as of the recording of this video, it's getting ready to be National HSA Day. So obviously, can kind of go hand in hand with what we're getting ready to talk about. So how do you feel about HSAs?
Yeah. So for HSAs, they've been around since like 2004. So way longer than most people even realize. Now, I had no idea what an HSA was, back in 2008 when my employer first offered them. And they only come, or you're only allowed to have one if you are on a qualified high deductible health plan. So I got that piece. Now, the HSA part I had to dig into. And even when I was asking like my HR people, my benefits people, no one really had enough information for me. So that's when I started digging. I was curious. And here was the main thing for me. It was me and my daughter on our health plan, our health insurance plan. And we were both very healthy individuals. We would usually go for our annual visits, checkups and things like that. And with this high deductible plan, that was included. But when I started looking at the premium, so the monthly amount that comes out of your paycheck every month, it was such a huge difference. And I'm like, look, I feel like I'm getting ripped off already by giving all this money to the insurance company. So, I'm talking to myself here. So I'm saying, okay, so I can pay a much lower premium. I hardly go to the doctor at all. Now I know, something catastrophic could happen, but I'm paying lower in premiums. And what I would have, if I would have gotten one of the other plans, one of the traditional plans where I paid more money, that would go to the insurance company. That's sunk cost. But now I'm paying a lower premium amount, and the difference, all I have to do is put it in my health savings account, and my employer put money in it, and I can invest it. It's like, so I was
a lot of benefits.
A whole lot of benefits. And at the time, and this was back in 2008, I didn't understand taxes like I wish I have. I have since definitely dug into taxes a lot more, but the whole tax treatment of it was way more valuable than I ever thought about. So the premiums obviously reduces my taxable income, but also the money I put in the health savings account, the contributions, those are tax-free. So that lowers my taxable income. And just like, an IRA, it grows tax-free. And then on the back end, when you take it out for, qualified health expenses, which includes dental and vision, when you take it out, you don't pay any taxes either. So throughout the whole pipeline of this HSA, you don't pay any taxes on it if you use it for qualified, health expenses. So I started doing a whole lot of digging over the years. And the one thing I'm most glad that I did is that after that first year, because I wanted to make sure my deductible was covered. I didn't want to put myself in a bind. So I wanted to make sure I always had enough cash to cover the deductible and possibly the out of pocket. But I was so ready to start investing. So ever since 2009, I've had it all invested. I think it was just in like a total stock market index fund. So it's growing all this time. And 2008, the market crashed.
That's what I was going to ask you the year. I think you mentioned the club was in 2008. I'm like, wait, like when in 2008?
That was a really good time, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, because
so those are lucky things. So,
yeah.
Sometimes we get luck. They have that saying that says, I'd rather be lucky than good. So I'm not saying I wasn't good, but I definitely had a lot of luck on my side because I started with the investment club in 2008. I started my HSA in 2008, and I started maxing out my retirement accounts in 2008, around 2008, 2009. So the health savings account, every year, I maxed it out, my contributions. And then, of course, I would take whatever my employer gave me, right? And total, we just had to make sure it was under what the annual max was. So every year I was able to do the family max because it was me and my daughter. It's only you. It only has to be you and one other person. Some people think it has to be you and a spouse. No, just you and one other person. So I maxed it out every year from 2009 up until I actually retired from our corporate job, retired super early in 2019. So that was 11 years. And so after 11 years, maxing out, invested in a total stock market index fund. When I checked the balance, I think last week it was like at $165,000 just in a health savings account. And knowing that I've been truly blessed, and so is my daughter, to be healthy and to not have anything catastrophic or any major illness all this time, more than likely as I get older, something will go wrong. Okay. More than likely my health expenses from here on out will be greater than they have been in the past. So to know that I have that dedicated account that's going to take care of that tax-free, that makes me feel pretty good. And it just kind of build in those systems that help me not have to worry about the whole financial part. So I can just do what I do, Yeah.
We talk about that triple tax benefit kind of thing and advantages of it. Have you used the card or spent on any type of expenses before?
No, I've always paid out of pocket. Now, I have not had any major expenses that I couldn't pay out of pocket. Now, what I did do is, and I still have, I have saved receipts. Now, I save them digitally. I just take a picture and put them in a file or whatever, and I have them categorized. But I have those receipts. And based on the IRS rules, there's no time limit to reimburse yourself. So some of those expenses, I incurred back in 2010, 2015, and I still have those records and those receipts where I have not reimbursed myself. So anytime I want to reimburse myself, I can.
Can I ask why? Like why you haven't?
Why I haven't? Because I haven't really needed to. Now, if I needed to get some cash that I wanted to be tax-free, all I have to do is, pull up my spreadsheet and my records and say, okay, I've got $5,000 worth of receipts. I want to take out $2,000 from my health savings account. So I'll take that out, match up enough receipts to cover it. I would file that with my taxes for the current year. And that's it. I just haven't, and again, I consider myself, very lucky to not need it. But I know that, life isn't going to be rosy all the time. There'll be something to happen to where I might need it. And, that's what an emergency fund is. That's why we build up our wealth, to the point where we don't have to, worry about things so much, from a financial standpoint. So I have the records and I have not needed to reimburse myself because I feel like it's more powerful to let that money grow in the stock market. And so that's just my view.
I was going to say, was that the biggest reason why you decided to pay out of pocket as opposed to using the HSA was because of you're able to invest it? Okay.
Yeah, because the way I looked at it, so let's say if something costs $300, out of pocket to do something for hospital visit.
Yeah, I say get some or something. Yeah, something.
Yeah. So let's say $300 bill. Okay, I could pay it out of my pocket, which I could do that, fairly easy. If I needed to, I could even break it up into payments. But the way I think of it, again, I love compound growth. So I'm not seeing that as $300. I'm seeing it as $900, 12 years from now or 15 years from now. So that's how I look at it, is that it's going to be worth a whole lot more in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years than this $300. If I spend the $300 today, then I'll never see the $300 again. So I just love the idea of money growing, and the fact that it's tax-free, gives me that little extra reason to just keep it growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a maximum on them, right? Like there's only so much you can put into them.
Exactly. Just like with any retirement account or whatever, there's limits. So for health savings account, now the last time I had a high deductible plan where I could contribute, it was 2019, but I believe that it's $3,550 for single and $7,100 for married is the maximum.
I want to say it's like 36 or something, like it's definitely higher than 3,000. I want to say it's like 3,600.
Yeah, it's 3,500 or 36. I think it's 7,100 if it's the family. So family would be you and one other person. So just check the most current IRS. And it's for HSAs, it's publication 969, where it has all the details. So we're talking about it now, really from a practical standpoint, a strategy standpoint, but be like me and always want to do your own digging and your own research. So IRS publication number 969 has all the details, and it typically goes up about $50 every year as far as the maximum contribution. $50 usually for single, and like maybe another $100 for family. Right. So for 2022, it probably got up a little bit.
Yeah. And so too, just to provide even more context for people, like let's just say it is 3,600. You do the math on that 3,600 a year, right? Divided by 12 months, right? That's $300. So $300 a month out of your paycheck, pre-taxed. Like, what else do you spend $300 on? Maybe
and here's the big deal. And it's almost open enrollment, which is why they have HSA Day on October 25th, because it's typically around open enrollment. So I guess the one actionable thing that you can do when your company or wherever you buy your insurance from, maybe it's on the ACA Obamacare exchange, but take a moment and take a look at your different options. High deductible plans, they work well for me. They work well for plenty other people. It doesn't mean that it is right for you, but you at least owe yourself to look at that as an option, because typically if you're on a high deductible health plan, even though the deductible is higher, typically the premium is lower or much lower. I know with me, with the options that I had at work, I think my premiums for my high deductible plan was 10 times less than the Cadillac plan. And because we were such low users of healthcare, it made sense. So for instance, if you have a high deductible plan that's $100 a month, and then the traditional plan is $300 a month, well, you're already saving yourself $200 in premiums right there that you can put into your HSA. Yeah. So you got to look at all of those different pieces of health insurance and not just one piece, not just the deductible. You want to look at the premium, you want to look at the deductible, and you want to look at the max out of pocket, and then estimate your own expenses and what you think you incur. If you're one of those people that typically go for your annual visits and that's it, well, high deductible plans have to include those. You don't even pay for those. So if that's your profile, it could be a good fit for you, but it's definitely worth taking a look at.
Yeah. So I think I heard you mention too, that when you first started your HSA and whether it was in investing, that you were relatively healthy at the time, right?
Right.
So like, what made you still decide to, go the HSA route, as well as like retirement? Like when some people might think, well, I don't have to start saving for retirement just yet because I'm young. So what made you decide to still plan ahead for the future, even though you were healthy?
Yeah, with the HSA, I'm definitely still healthy, but healthy to the point where, So, I would always think of retirement like most people, being on a golf course, laying in a hammock and things like that. And finally, I came across, for a long time, I was interested in personal finance and financial literacy. And then there started to be all these little subsets of personal finance. And one of those was FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And that attracted me a lot because I knew that I had learned that my life's work was financial literacy and financial education, because here I was, a little Black girl that grew up in poverty, in rural poverty, raised by a single dad with 6 kids. And I was able to learn about money, learn about personal finance, start understanding investing, started becoming financially independent, and got to the point to where I was creating generational wealth. So I figured if I could do it, from where I started, being on the free lunch program and all of that, that there's so many more that can at least get on the path if they had access to the information, or because you don't know what you don't know. So if maybe more people in their circle, maybe people that look like them started talking about it, that would be on their radar, that they would be able to get the education, hear other people talking about it, have more access to it, be around people where that information is adjacent enough for you to at least be curious and go digging. So for me, I just figured that was just to be able to get to the point where I knew I could retire sooner than 60, 65 or whatever that everybody said you retired. Because I was just mostly making a shift, if anything. So the idea of becoming financially independent to the point where I did not have to depend on a paycheck, oh, that was so powerful to me, because my dad and his generation, their idea of financial success was working for a company for 30 years and having a good pension, which back then was good, but there's no more pension. It's like we're left to fend for ourselves and figure this out ourselves, right? With a 401k or whatever our employer offers. So when I saw that there was a way to be able to get to that point far sooner than 60 or even 55, I retired in my 40s. So to me, that gave me so much more time to do or spend more time doing what I believe I was put on this earth to do. So that was my motivation the whole time. That was my why. Like, I wasn't just looking to retire from my job and just do nothing. No way. Now I only got 40 or 50 years to actually do the things I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And that's real though. People, for whatever reason, put an age on retirement,
Right.
number. You retire when you're ready, and when you retire when you're able to.
Right.
But you talk about passing down the information, and you have a ebook and a book available, right?
Yeah. So that was sort of part of my journey too. And I guess, my legacy. So a little while after I got divorced, and I'm learning all about finances, right? I'm learning all about money and credit and saving and investing. And I didn't want to lose that, right? As a parent, you can talk to your mom. As a parent, when we learn things, we want to make sure we hand it down to our kids. And for me, so at the time, I started writing a book when my daughter was like 14 years old. So I just didn't want to lose everything that I had learned. I wanted to pass it on to my daughter. And at 14, she's not listening to what I have to say. So, my major in college was journalism and communication. So I love to write. And when I saw that it was fairly, I wouldn't say easy, but the world has changed in terms of publishing and writing a book. Okay. So I said, you know what? This is a gift I want to give to my daughter. So I started writing the book when she was 14 years old. And my goal was to put in all the things that I had learned. And the biggest challenge was trying to write it in a way that she would actually read it. So I wrote it in these short little letters, and I had a little sign off on every letter. I got right to the point to share with her what I wanted her to learn about all these different personal finance topics. So I started writing the book when she was 14. My goal was to finish the book and give it to her as her high school graduation gift. So I got that finished when she was like 17. And when it got published, I was just amazed at the response, because I wasn't writing it to be a New York Times bestseller or to sell millions of copies. I only wanted to sell one copy, one for my daughter and maybe one for her daughter or her child whenever she decides to have kids. So I started, being invited to speak at schools. I guess you write a book and people think that you're an expert. So I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I was definitely willing to talk to other people's kids about money and personal finance in the same way I would talk to my own kid. So that's what I did. And I think that's what sort of led me to see how important this topic is, and that the right stage to teach it is when people are really young. I'm talking high school, middle school, and because there's some age appropriate things that they can understand. It's like if you can do 4+4, then you could learn how compound growth works, right?
Yeah.
So the book is part of my legacy. I may go on to write other books and create other content, but that will always be my most important piece of content.
Yeah.
So.
And that's amazing just to hear it too, because sometimes you hear people say things like, well, we shouldn't be teaching our kids this just yet, or, let them enjoy their childhood, which is, everyone is a parent in their own way. But at the same time, if parents, right, don't teach their children this, then who else will, right? It's not mandatory for the school system to teach them these type of things. I always say that there's a reason why it's not taught in school. There's a huge reason.
Well, that's the thing, as you know, not all 50 states require a personal finance class for graduation. I mean, I think today there's only 21 states that require it for graduation, and even most of those states only require it within an existing subject like business, math. I'm in Ohio. It's so crazy, but they put it in social studies, and the amount of time that they get to spend on that is almost nothing. Now, there's an organization that I do love called Next Gen Personal Finance. They are a nonprofit that helps educate teachers and teach them how to teach personal finance. Amazing organization.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I mean, youth, another reason why it's so important too to kind of teach the youth is because they have the one thing that no one else can control, right? And that's time, right? No matter how much money you have or how powerful you are, how smart you are, you can't go back in time. But when you have all those years ahead of you, it's like, as you mentioned, like there's people who are 40 who wish they knew, this stuff when they were 30. People who are 30 that wish, so on and so forth. So that's why it's just extremely, crucial for people to talk about this. But, going off that, mentioning the book and the reason why you started it leads me to my final question, which is a question that I ask everyone on Defiant Legacy. And that question is, how do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? Well, definitely I want to be remembered as a mom. The book that I wrote, Money Letters to My Daughter, that's to me a big deal just because it was written from the heart. It was a labor of love. But bigger than that, I guess I would like to be known for my efforts around financial literacy, that I was following this big dream of creating a financially literate society. And when I say that, I'm wanting to reach the kid like me, that grew up in poverty, that was on the free lunch program, and then even like rural poverty, because I think about how different that is from, if you're in the inner city, a lot of times you will have public transportation. You might have a Boys and Girls Club. Growing up in rural poverty, you don't even have access to transportation. So sometimes it could be even worse. But I just think about that kid. That kid is me. So when I've gone back to, my school district, schools that's in the area that I grew up in, I tell them all, like you just mentioned, you guys are all like wealthier than me because you have more time, and that time is actually more powerful than money. And especially if I'm talking to high schoolers or college kids, double that. So yeah, that's what I would like to be known for is, the importance of financial literacy, financial education. And there's a huge, behavioral side to this. Poverty is a state of mind, and it messes with your psyche, your whole life, and it shapes how you think about money, how you feel about money, and how you move through life. So those are the kind of things that I hope that someone will say at my funeral one day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you even talking about, time too. It's not even just about time in the market and how your money can grow and compound interest, but time in which these things, right? The longer you know these things, the better situation you'll be in and be able to put your family in. So if you could, if you don't mind, where can people find you, whether it be social media, any links you want to drop, any promo or marketing for yourself, by all means, feel free to run it up. Feel free.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I don't do a whole lot of marketing or promotion these days. I'm actually in a master's program right now at Kansas State. I'm pursuing my master's degree in personal financial planning and financial therapy, which is speaks to my interest in the behavioral side of money. But I'm on all social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the professional side. I like that as well. But you can hit me up, Jackie Cummings Koski. And, I'd love to connect with you. And thank you, Theas, for letting me be on your show and chatting with you a little bit about financial literacy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We appreciate you. Again, follow Define Legacy on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and obviously YouTube whenever you get your podcast. This was a dope episode. Health savings account. Again, I think it's one of the most underrated and not really talked about accounts. People always talk about 401ks and IRAs and things like that. And obviously, checking and savings accounts, but health savings account, everybody, has to do their best to try and stay healthy. So whether you're investing it, saving it, but establishing and starting one, I think is very important. So thank you again. We appreciate it. And just like that, y'all, Define Legacy.